All right. Good evening. Welcome to AC Transit's Rapid Corridors Telegraph Avenue Project Virtual Community Meeting. My name is Robert Del Rosario, and I'm the Director of Service Development and Planning for AC Transit. Tonight's virtual community meeting is an opportunity for AC Transit to discuss the Rapid Corridors Telegraph Avenue project and solicit your feedback. Our agenda for the evening is simple. I will be providing some housekeeping instructions and brief opening remarks. Then we will move into a presentation of approximately 25 minutes. And please note that this meeting will be recorded. We have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish and Chinese, as well as closed captioning for this meeting. So I will take a moment to share a number of housekeeping items related to those functions. Also, as a note, during the presentation, we will be taking a number of pauses and approximately 5-second pauses in between slides. And this will allow our interpreters to catch up, but you'll even see some longer breaks in there for when our interpreters need to take a break or switch roles. First, closed captioning in English. It's available by clicking the CC icon in your Zoom control panel. Secondly, we have simultaneous interpretation in Spanish and Chinese for this meeting. For participants that want to listen to the meeting in English, once we turn on the interpretation feature, you will see a little globe icon in your Zoom control panel as soon as I finish these instructions and the Spanish and Chinese interpreters finish their instructions. That globe will appear. Once it does, please click on the interpretation globe icon and select English from the menu. Don't do this yet. The globe is not there right now because we have not yet activated the interpretation feature. I will now hand it over to the Spanish and Chinese interpreters for instructions on how to participate in the meeting in these languages. We will all hear these instructions first in Spanish, then in Chinese. That's supposed to happen. After the instructions, we'll move forward to our preferred language channel, after which we will only hear the meeting in our preferred language. Spanish-speaking interpreter, please go ahead and provide your instructions now.
Buenas noches, bienvenido a la reunión virtual de la comunidad para conversar sobre el proyecto de corredores rápidos de Telegraph Avenue. Para participar en esta reunión en español, por favor espere hasta que encendamos la función de interpretación. Una vez que se encienda, verá un pequeño icono de un mapamundi en la parte inferior de la pantalla. En cuanto yo termine esas instrucciones, me seguirá la intérprete o el intérprete chino. Una vez que haya terminado, ese mapamundi aparecerá y una vez que aparezca, seleccione el globo para la interpretación en la pantalla de Zoom y seleccione español desde el menú. Si necesita servicios de interpretación y ha llamado por medio de la línea de teléfonos de Zoom, puede acceder a los servicios de interpretación al español colgando ese número y llamando al 844-854-2222, código de acceso 1213-095. Nuevamente, para los servicios de interpretación al español, llame al 844-854-2222, código de acceso 1213-095. Chinese interpreter, please go ahead now.
各位观众，晚上好！欢迎您来参加今晚 AC Transit Telegraph Avenue 大街快速通道项目的网络社区会议。我们为今晚的晚会提供中文翻译，请需要中文翻译的参会者稍等片刻。我们介绍完 Zoom 的翻译功能的使用后，立刻会开启 Zoom 的翻译功能。届时，您会在您的电脑屏幕下方看到地球仪的标记，选择中文翻译，请点击地球仪标记，并选择 Chinese 中文。如果你是拨打 Zoom 的电话参加会议的，并需要中文翻译，为更好地为您提供翻译服务，请挂断 Zoom 电话，另外拨打844-844-0414之后输入密码598821，再重复一遍拨打电话844-844-0414之后输入密码598821。Robert, hand the mic back to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Tammy, if you can please turn on the interpretation feature so that attendees can select their language. We will give everyone a second to join their appropriate language channel, English, Spanish, or Chinese. Everyone must select the language. We will wait a moment for everyone to join their appropriate channels. Again, you must use the globe in your control panel to select your language. This includes those of you participating in English. Let's give a 30-second pause now for everyone to join their channel. All right, thank you all for your patience as we work to ensure equitable participation for our non-English speakers. Now I will quickly review how we will take questions this evening. If you're watching this meeting on Zoom, we will take questions during Q&A using the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen. Please note, raise hands via the Zoom platform will be used only for our phone participants. Those accessing Zoom on a computer or smartphone should use the Q&A tool to ask questions. You can also provide feedback about the project by June 25th by taking the project survey at, and I will spell this out for the interpreters, tinyurl.com/rc-telegraph. So again, that's tinyurl.com/rc-telegraph. You can also call AC Transit at 510-891-7262, or you can email AC Transit at, and I'll also spell this out for the interpreters, planning@actransit.org. That's planning@actransit.org. Or you can send feedback by mail to AC Transit at 1600 Franklin Street in Oakland, and the zip code is 94612. You may also contact AC Transit in this way for a hard copy of the survey if you're unable to access it online, or leave a message to request any project materials. If you are interested in the associated Dana Complete Streets pilot project, a recording of the virtual community meeting and project information can be found online at, and I will spell this out, www.actransit.org/RAPID-CORRIDORS/DANET. That's www.actransit.org/rapid-corridors/Dana Street. Okay, so thanks for your patience and welcome again to the virtual meeting for the Telegraph Avenue Rapid Corridors project. And thank you for joining us today and taking some time to learn about the Telegraph Avenue project. I do want to acknowledge that we have some officials and stakeholders that have joined us today. I will do my best to name everyone that is with us this evening, and I hope I don't miss anyone. My apologies if I do. So I see we have Alex Knox with us, Executive Director of the Telegraph Business Improvement District. Shifra Benedictus Kesner, Executive Director of the Temescal Business Improvement District. Angie Chen from Berkeley Councilmember Rigel Robinson's office. Olga Bolatina, Chair of Sierra Club, SF Bay Area Chapter. And we have Derek Sagehorn from East Bay Transit Riders Union. Thank you all for joining us. Okay, finally we can get to the program. So I will just kick it off with some background on AC Transit. During the pandemic, AC Transit has been hard at work every day getting service on the road. And behind the scenes, AC Transit has been busy all year long on a variety of key projects, including our Tempo BRT line on International Boulevard, which opened in August of 2020. We started a mobile payment application for fares. And in March of 2021, AC Transit launched the all-door boarding pilot project, where Clipper card users can board from a front or rear door to tap their cards. Line 6 is one of the 2 routes selected for the all-door boarding pilot project, which helps speed up passenger boardings, as well as reducing crowding near the front door. The Rapid Corridors project is one of the projects that AC Transit Planning Department is undertaking to improve transit service reliability. Meanwhile, we've been hard at work planning service restoration as we recover from the pandemic. So thank you again for joining us tonight and for your continued support as we work to restore and rebuild service. So for those joining the meeting late, please see the instructions on the screen for closed captioning and language access. We will wait 1 minute to allow folks that have joined late to join their language channels. All right, so I will now hand over the mic to Claudia Burgos. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me? Can you see me? I don't see myself. Can somebody let me know if you could see me?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. My name is Claudia Burgos. I'm the Director of Legislative Affairs and Community Relations here at AC Transit. Thanks again for joining us this evening and for your continued support as we work to rebuild and restore service in the 13 cities and 8 unincorporated areas of Alameda and Contra Costa counties. We at AC Transit pride ourselves in being the 3rd largest public bus system in California and the 3rd largest transit agency in the San Francisco Bay Area. Our service really is critical to the regional economy and for the riders that rely on us for their essential daily trips. Our Transbay service across the Bay Bridge, San Mateo Bridge, and the Dumbarton Bridge had surpassed 15,000 average daily rides before the pandemic and was a service that had consistently shown year-over-year growth. We were getting 30,000 students to school daily before the pandemic hit. So whether you're a rider, a business owner, an elected official, and even if you drive, I guarantee you that anything that impacts AC Transit in one way or another impacts you too. And we know that there are different stakeholders in the audience today, some representing elected officials, some representing businesses. So I will take a minute to just go over some of these statistics to really highlight the size and the impact that AC Transit has on the East Bay. So prior to March 2020, we carried approximately 189,000 weekday riders and more than 50 million riders annually. As of last week, our ridership is still down 60% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Our Transbay ridership has been severely impacted due to people working from home and not commuting, but we know that the pandemic is not going to last forever. And when the economy reopens, we will play a critical role in the Bay Area's transportation network. We already connect to 16 other public and private bus systems, 25 BART stations, 6 Amtrak stations, and 4 ferry terminals. Next slide, please. And while our overall ridership today is a fraction of what it was before the pandemic, we continue providing a critical service, in particular for those that have continued to ride during the pandemic. AC Transit has always been a lifeline for many, and our service has always been a critical component of the fabric of many East Bay communities. So ensuring the sustainability of AC Transit service really is a matter of equity, given that 65% of our riders are low income, 75% are people of color. And we did conduct a survey during the pandemic, and we found that those that were still riding, 40% were taking essential trips, 15% identified themselves as essential workers, and 43% indicated that they don't have access to a car. So today, AC Transit's ridership is the second highest of any Bay Area transit agency, carrying more riders than BART on an average weekday, and we're second currently only to Muni. With that, I will hand the mic over to Mika Miyasato, who will present the Rapid Corridors Telegraph Avenue project. Thank you.
Thank you, Claudia. My name is Mika Miyasato, Senior Transportation Planner at AC Transit. I'm pleased to speak with you tonight about the Rapid Corridors Telegraph Avenue project. Telegraph Avenue is a very important corridor for the East Bay community with historically strong ridership. The Telegraph Avenue Rapid Corridor project is aimed to enhance transit operation and improve service quality for bus lines 6 and 800 that run along Telegraph Avenue. Additionally, in March 2021, AC Transit launched the all-door boarding pilot project, where clipboard card users can board from a front or rear door to tap their cars. Line 6 is one of the 2 routes selected for the all-door boarding pilot project. This helps speeding up passenger boarding as well as reducing crowding near front door. Together with all-door boarding pilot project, the Rapid Corridor project will reduce travel time and enhance transit reliability for passengers traveling along Telegraph Avenue. This project proposed to implement short-term recommendation from AC Transit 2016 Major Corridor Study, which identified infrastructure investment that will help buses run faster and more reliably on 11 key corridors that carry more than half of the people who ride AC Transit. Currently, 3 corridors from the study are receiving improvements. This includes San Pablo Avenue, Grand and West Grand Avenue, and Telegraph Avenue. Today's presentation focuses on the Telegraph Avenue corridor. As mentioned earlier, the Dana Complete Street pilot project is along this corridor, but not included as part of this presentation. If you're interested in learning about the Grand Avenue, West Grand Avenue project, please attend a virtual community meeting on June 8th from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. The Telegraph Avenue Rapid Corridors project will implement signal improvements along 4 miles of Telegraph Avenue from 20th Street in Oakland to downtown Berkeley. Changes to bus stops south of 51st Street will be made through City of Oakland Complete Streets project. North of 51st Street, the Rapid Corridors project proposes to implement longer bus stops, bus stop relocation, bus stop optimization, and sidewalk repair. Line 6 and 800 run along Telegraph Avenue. Line 6 connects downtown Berkeley and downtown Oakland. It is one of the highest ridership routes in AC Transit, having approximately 5,700 weekday riders pre-COVID. It is part of the AC Transit major corridors. Line 800 is an all-nighter route operating between midnight and 5 a.m. It connects San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley, El Cerrito, and Richmond. Line 800 travels on Telegraph Avenue between 20th Street and Ashby Avenue. It had 370 rides on average weekday before the pandemic. Proposed improvements include moving stops for better access, extending red curves for better bus access, optimizing bus stop spacing, improving traffic signals, and repairing some sidewalks. These proposed improvements will provide several benefits, including reduced travel time, enhancing transit reliability, and improving access to and from the bus for transit riders. There are two types of bus stop locations, near side and far side stops. Near side bus stops are located immediately before crossing an intersection, and far side bus stops are located immediately after crossing an intersection. Far side bus stop relocation means that buses will spend less time waiting at red signals, and that pedestrian will be provided with improved visibility when crossing the street. Let's give our interpreters a moment to swap. By placing a bus stop on the far side, the driver can use the transit signal priority for faster travel through signalized intersection and can pull straight into the stop because there's no parking behind it. Also, it can be easier to pull out of the stop if the signal behind the stop has turned red. This improvement means that buses will move more quickly along Telegraph Avenue and that pedestrians will be provided with improved visibility when crossing the street. Relocating bus stops to the far side of the intersection this way is expected to increase safety. This project proposed to convert many of the near side stop along the Telegraph Avenue into far side stop. Something to note is that parking will be removed from a new far side stop curb areas, but will be added to the previous near side stop locations. This will be discussed later in the presentation. Some bus stops are proposed to be extended, which requires a longer red curb. Longer bus stops provide buses with more space to align with the curb when approaching bus stops. The ability of buses to enter the bus stop to dock parallel to the curb and then re-enter the general traffic flow is affected by the length of the no parking zone or red curb before or after the bus stop. Providing sufficient space for buses to align next to the curb will improve accessibility for customers with all levels of physical ability. This is especially critical in deploying an ADA bus lift. In reviewing bus stop locations and spacing, we consider several elements, including land use, ridership, bus operations, safety, and stop spacing. Bus stop locations are proposed to be adjusted to achieve desired spacing to balance ease of access to bus stops and efficient bus operations. In the project area, this means reducing the total number of stops along the route by removing some stops that are too closely spaced or otherwise not optimal. The project proposes to align bus stop spacing more closely meeting the AC Transit Board Policy 501 bus stop guidelines. The board policy sets bus stop spacing standard for rapid bus only service as 1,300 to 1,900 feet. This rapid bus only service type has stops that are typically within walking radius, but more widely spaced than local service. Rapid bus only service spacing should be applied on streets with a single local service that also provides frequent service. Instead of having bus stops every 2 blocks, most bus stops are proposed to be spaced every 4 blocks. This policy seeks to balance the convenience of having a stop nearby with a time benefit for all riders along the route. This map provides an overview of the bus stop that will be added, improved, removed, or will remain as they are today, as well as location of traffic signal improvements. The filled green circle indicates a bus stop addition and the red circle with an X indicates a bus stop removal. 4 of the proposed removals are to shift a near side to far side stop, while the other results from a bus stop optimization to achieve the board approved spacing for rapid bus service. The green circle with just an outline indicates a stop whose location is to remain, but will have an improvement such as repaired sidewalks or longer bus stops. The gray circle indicates bus stops that will have no changes. This map, as well as a table summarizing bus stop changes, are available on the project website at www.actransit.org/rapid-corridors if you need to look at this in more detail. South of 51st Street, bus stop changes will be delivered as part of the City of Oakland's Complete Street project. This AC Transit project will include only traffic signal improvements on Telegraph between 51st and 20th Street, Thomas L. Berkeley Way in Oakland. In the project area, there are currently 37 bus stops. After implementing the proposed project, bus stop changes, there will be 20 bus stops that are spaced apart on average of 1,300 feet. With the proposed changes, 80% of the line 6 and 800 riders would continue to use the same bus stops, and 7% of riders would use the relocated bus stops at other side of the intersection. 13% of riders would need to walk to different bus stop. For those who would walk to different bus stops, we estimate additional walking distance of 1 to 2 blocks. While some riders may walk longer to access the bus stops, the proposed project would reduce travel time and improve transit reliability. Now, let's talk about the proposed traffic signal improvements. Transit signal priority allows buses to request priority upon arrival, and the signal can grant additional second of green light to reduce time spent waiting at red lights. The retiming and synchronization of traffic signals will help provide adequate crossing time for people walking and bicycling through the intersection. Coupled with signal coordination and retiming, transit signal improvements will improve transit signal reliability and reduce travel time. This signal equipment can also be used by the city's emergency vehicles to get on scene more quickly. Traffic signal improvements are proposed at all signalized intersections between downtown Oakland and downtown Berkeley along Line 6. Some sidewalks at existing and new bus stops are proposed to be improved, rebuilding some sidewalk areas and paving some portions of dirt planter strips to provide access to bus doors and space for ADA bus lifts. At some stops, bike racks, planter pods, and other street furniture will also be moved to provide ADA access. These changes improve safety and access for passengers of all ages and abilities. Making these proposed improvements will result in a few trade-offs. Adjusting bus stop spacing will result in faster travel time. And if traveling on Telegraph Avenue in the project area, the average maximum walking distance to reach any bus stop will be 2 blocks or approximately a little over 2 minutes. Longer bus stops and bus stop relocation will improve service and reduce transit delays. In areas where bus stops are removed, some additional parking spaces will be gained. In areas where we are proposing longer bus stop or new bus stops, parking spaces will be reduced. Overall, there will be additional 11 parking spaces along the 4-mile corridor. Now I'm handing over to the mic to the Will Buller, who will go over detailed design concept by block.
Thank you, Mika. Good evening, everybody. My name is Will Buller, AC Transit Traffic Engineer. Can everybody see me?
Yes, you're fine.
Great, thanks. So I'll be walking you through the proposed bus stop changes throughout the project area. To make reviewing the specific details at each proposed bus stop change easier to understand, we've broken down the Telegraph project area into 7 segments, which we'll now review, starting from the south end of the project area, moving to the north. In addition to the changes to bus stop spacing, you'll notice many of the bus stops are relocated to the far side of signalized intersection. You'll have an opportunity to ask specific questions via the question and answer chat on Zoom, or raising your hand if you're on the phone. In addition, you can review these more deeply through the online survey access through the project website. Let's give our interpreters a moment to swap. Segment A contains bus stop improvements from 51st Street to Eileen Street. The project proposes to remove the southbound bus stop at the 52nd Street intersection and a pair of bus stops at the Eileen Street intersection. The northbound bus stop at the 52nd Street intersection will be relocated to the far side of 51st Street, where the Oakland DOT installed a bus stop located in a short transit lane. In addition, the project proposes to relocate a pair of bus stops at the 55th Street intersection from the near side to far side. Currently, existing bus stops are spaced close together. These bus stop changes and consolidations would improve travel speed and transit reliability. Additionally, the sidewalk at the new southbound stop at 55th Street will receive sidewalk improvements for improved safety and accessibility. These changes would create 2 net additional parking spaces in this segment and would improve the sidewalk at 55th Street intersection. Segment B contains bus stop improvements from 58th Street to 60th Street. The project is proposing to remove 2 bus stops, leaving the northbound bus stop at 59th Street as is, and improving the existing far side southbound bus stop at 59th Street with an extension of the red curve for added safety and accessibility benefit. Similarly, these proposed changes will help reduce the travel time of buses and improve transit reliability. The pair of far side stops at 59th Street helps to best optimize bus stop spacing between previous and next bus stops in each direction. The net change of total parking spaces is an addition of 3 spaces in this case. Segment C includes improvements from 62nd to Alcatraz. The proposed project recommends a removal of 1 pair of bus stops at the 62nd Street intersection. Removing these stops in favor of adjacent far side stops at signalized intersections will be a major safety benefit. Relocating the southbound near side bus stop at Alcatraz to the far side with sidewalk improvements. The existing northbound bus stop at Alcatraz will be left at its current far side location. Optimizing bus stop spacing and relocating to the far side in this way can help to reduce travel time and improve transit reliability. There's no net change of parking for this segment between 62nd Street and Alcatraz Avenue. Segment D contains bus stop improvements from Woolsey to Prince Street. 1 midlock bus stop between Prince Street and Woolsey is proposed to be removed. This bus stop doesn't have a pair or a companion in the opposite direction. This bus stop removal will help optimize bus stop spacing and improve safety. A far side bus stop pair with sidewalk improvements are proposed to be added at the Woolsey intersection. The new proposed pair of far side bus stops at Woolsey Street is important because they set up an efficient bus stop distance between previous and next bus stops in each direction to optimize reliability and travel speed, as well as providing access to bus stops. In the segment between Woolsey and Prince, there will be a net loss of 6 parking spaces. Segment E covers improvements from Webster Street to Russell Street. The project proposes to remove 1 pair of bus stops at Russell Street. The project also proposes to eliminate northbound bus stop at Webster Street and the southbound bus stop at Ashby Avenue. The existing southbound Webster Street bus stop and the existing northbound Ashby Avenue stop will become a new pair. Consolidating 2 pairs to 1 pair will help us achieve the AC Transit Board policy spacing to reduce our travel time and improve our reliability. There'll be a net addition of 9 parking spaces for this segment between Webster and Russell. Segment F contains improvements from Stewart Street to Derby Street. The proposed or the project proposes removing a pair of bus stops at Derby Street and improving the pair of bus stops at Stewart Street with red curb extensions. This will optimize bus stop spacing and allow for buses to better align to the curb for improved accessibility and safety. There'll be no net change of parking for this segment between Stewart Street and Derby Street. Segment G includes improvements from Parker Street to Dwight Way. A pair of bus stops at the Parker Street intersection, which is an unsignalized intersection, is proposed to be removed. The near side northbound bus stop at Dwight Way will be relocated to the Lake Street T intersection. That pair with the existing to remain bus stop on the other side, it'll be paired with the existing bus stop on the other side. This helps to achieve optimum bus stop spacing for better reliability and travel time. It also removes a conflict between buses trying to access the stop at Dwight and right turning vehicles, which improves bus access and safety for pedestrians crossing Dwight Way. There will be a net addition of 3 parking spaces for this segment between Parker Street and Dwight Way. We are currently collecting public input on the project. The deadline for comments is June 25th. We'll go over different ways to provide input in addition to participating in the question and answer session as part of this virtual meeting. We'll take the public input and finalize designs for this project, which will be prepared later this year, with construction and project completion following by the fall of 2022. Thanks everyone for listening. This concludes the presentation portion of this meeting. We'll now move into the Q&A session.
Thanks, Will. We recognize that that was a lot of information, but we thought it was important to share with you not only the ways in which we have been impacted by the pandemic, but also that we are still advancing projects aimed at improving service quality, reliability, and the rider experience. With that, we are now ready to transition to the portion of the program for comments, feedback, and Q&A. Many of you here tonight live, work, and/or travel on Telegraph Avenue, and we want to hear from you. We will be posing any questions that arise to our panel for a response so that all participants are able to hear the answer. We will be recording comments and feedback addressing the Telegraph Avenue project so that we can consider them in refining and finalizing the project design. But for the sake of time, we will not restate these. So first, for people viewing the presentation on a computer or smartphone, please use the Q&A tool in your Zoom control panel and type in your question or comments. Please do not use the raise hand function if you're watching the meeting on the Zoom platform, as we are reserving this feature for folks calling in on the phone only to ask their questions. Now I'm going to review how people joining this meeting on the phone can participate in the Q&A session. While I give instructions to the English phone line participants, the interpreters will give specific instructions to those participating via the Spanish and Chinese phone lines. For those of you on Zoom on your computer, if you have a question for our panel, this is a time to get it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. For English-speaking participants calling into the meeting on the phone, when we begin taking questions from the English phone line, you will need to dial *9 to raise your hand. Then, when you are called upon by the last 4 digits of your phone number, dial *6 to unmute yourself. Okay, so before we start the Q&A, we will take a 1-minute break to allow time for interpreters to switch roles, catch their breath, and take a sip of water. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll be back in 1 minute. Okay, before we jump into the Q&A, I do want to acknowledge some additional stakeholders who have joined us tonight. Thank you for doing that. I know we mentioned Olga earlier, but Olga also, besides being chair of the Sierra Club's SF Bay Area chapter, she's also representing Oakland Councilmember Dan Kalb. We have Kieran Slaughter, Chief Community Development Officer for the City of Berkeley and Telegraph Business Improvement District Board Member. We have Davina Sirdum, Local Government Relations Director, and Muskan Sati, Local Affairs Associate for UC Berkeley's Associated Students of the University of California, also known as ASUC. So thanks for your patience. I am now going to introduce panelists for the comments, feedback, and Q&A session. We have 4 panelists tonight, some of whom you've met. We have Mika Miyasato, Senior Transportation Planner, and Will Buller, Traffic Engineer, who presented earlier. We also have Michael Eshelman, Manager of Service Planning for AC Transit, and Phil Erickson is a Principal Urban Designer with Community Design and Architecture, who are working with AC Transit regarding the location and improvements for bus stops. So we will begin the Q&A session with one of the questions we received prior to the meeting and questions received in the Zoom Q&A chat box. So question 1, has AC Transit considered including bus boarding islands for this plan to reduce dwell time and make it easier for seniors and people with accessibility issues? Mika, you want to take that one?
Sure. Thank you, Robert. This is Mika Miyasato. You know, the boarding island works in many different locations. Unfortunately for this project, it's a budget consideration. The making a boarding island takes a significant amount of financial resource to make it happen for the project along the Telegraph corridor. So at this time that we are working on the 3 different corridors to make an improvement: San Pablo Avenue for signal improvements, Telegraph Avenue for the bus stop improvements and the signal improvements, and West Grand and Grand Avenue for signal improvements and bus stop improvements. To address the 3 corridors, we are not able to accommodate bus boarding island, except the 1 bus boarding island on the Dana Street in the South Side neighborhood.
Great, thanks, Mika. The next question is probably also for you, Mika. Is it AC Transit's policy to create new on-street parking spots with the curb space freed up by stop consolidation? It seems that additional on-street parking is at odds with AC Transit's mission and the operation of its buses. Additionally, have you considered using the space for parklets or other methods of activating the street?
Thank you, Robert. That's a great question. And you know that some people did ask that question to us. So for most people, you know, we understand that the space of the car. So we are expressing the parking gains and potential losses in terms of the lengths of cars. And the AC Transit does not dictate how the former bus stop space could be used. So it's up to the city to decide what's the best use of the curb space. So we'll be discussing and coordinating with the city. Okay, if we vacate the bus stops, how would they like to use the curb spaces? So that will be left with the city, whether these spaces will be the best appropriate for the parking spaces, paid parking spaces, 2-hour parking spaces, potentially a parklet. We'll make sure to discuss the appropriate use of curb space with the city.
Thanks, Mika. Here's a question from Alex Knox from Telegraph, TBID. Thank you for the presentation. How exact are the proposed locations for new bus stops? Are there more detailed maps and other graphics that show which parking spaces would be impacted?
I can take that question one more time. So we don't have a graphics for every single bus stops, but we have developed the diagrams for some of the more challenging locations. And we are starting to develop those diagrams.
And actually, Mika, let me add on to that. This is Phil from Community Design and Architecture. The segment maps that were shown earlier in the presentation, the symbol that are on those, and they're also available in the survey that you can take. Those are actually fairly accurate. The colored bars for the bus stops do indicate, both for the bus stops that are being removed and for new bus stops or improved bus stops, the location of where the parking would be. Typically, if it's, say, a far side station, it would be the spaces that are just north of the crosswalk as far as the number of stops that are being removed.
Robert, can I add to it just a little bit?
Yeah, please do.
Thinking like an engineer, that we did have a template, you know, the first door, the second doors of all our buses that are using the route. And we typically analyze the stop in relation to those and the minimal impact to bus stops, and of course, placement adjacent to an intersection. So I hope that helps answer the question as well.
Great. And we will try to take some pauses in between so that the interpreters can catch up. And probably in about 5 minutes, we'll take another break for the interpreters. So this one is from Derek Sagehorn, East Bay Transit Riders Union. Has AC Transit considered a queue jump lane at Ashby? This is a congested intersection that slows down trips for riders. Will, I think you'd be appropriate to take this one as well.
Sure, thanks, Robert. Will Buller, AC Transit traffic engineer. Yeah, we considered that. Unfortunately, the, when you talk queue jump, you have to get past the queue. And so that means moving over to the right side of the road and making way for that bus. And usually we do it with a shared right turn. And given that particular layout and geometry of that intersection, what was happening was that it was going to require that the bus stop be pulled way back on the near side because it didn't have a landing place on the far side. And that was going to take up even more parking, end up almost, quite a bit of the block, because we need a detection zone between that bus stop and the limit line at the intersection to trigger the queue jump. And so it was also impacting a full grown, beautiful tree. So all these things considered, that in addition to all the costs associated and the costs associated with a queue jump typically at an intersection, was why we chose not to go that route.
Thanks, Will. Okay, we'll go to our next question, and this one's for Phil, since it has some details from the plans. The proposed stop at 62nd and Alcatraz will block 5 businesses that are already struggling. Each of these businesses are collectives with multiple agents in each. There are no storefronts at the end of the block. Why not place a stop there? We'd rather lose parking than have our storefront completely obscured from street view.
Okay, great question. We have been looking at these situations when we have been looking to locate the stops. So here you see where the stop is proposed, that C3 stop at Alcatraz and Telegraph. And we did look at other options for putting the bus stop along that block. If we moved it to the north, to the south, as you're saying, that's North Street that's there, it's not labeled. You are correct that the buses would be stopping in front of the building there that does not have active storefronts. Unfortunately, with the way that the geometry of the buses and where we can put the stop works at that end, the rear door of a 40-foot bus wouldn't be accessible unless we removed a tree. And the rear doors of the 60-foot bus that the 800 line uses would be blocked by a utility pole. Also, putting the bus stop in that location basically makes it a near side stop for North Street. And while that's not a signalized intersection, it might not make it that challenging for the bus. When a bus would be stopped there, people walking along the sidewalk of Telegraph and crossing North Street would not be visible to drivers who are coming south and making a turn onto North Street. So it's not there are safety concerns with a location like that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Let's go to our next question. So this one is for Will. Given that you are asking pedestrians in some cases to walk further, and you are proposing signal improvements to speed up bus travel, would AC Transit consider automatic pedestrian recall at all signals in the project area to improve the pedestrian experience?
I know that this has been gaining popularity, this type of treatment, especially because of COVID. But unfortunately, what it does is it causes the main line, a mainline disruption every single cycle. So if you can imagine it, just on average, you have a signal that has a cycle of 1 minute. Even if there is no PED present, every single, let's just say 40 seconds, you'll get a 20-second disruption of the main line every single minute. And so what we realize that that the TSP and the coordination and the improvements on the signal are slightly increasing the green time along the main line for 8 to 12 seconds if the bus arrives at that given time. But overall, the efficiency of the intersection is improved because of not having it in recall, putting detection there, and so on. So that type of treatment, although seemingly very convenient for pedestrians, is not a fair trade-off, I guess, to all modes, and the slight delay for pedestrians, 8 to 12 seconds, it isn't a fair trade-off either. So I hope I answered the question.
Thanks, Will. Let's take a 1-minute pause so we can give the interpreters a quick break, and then we'll come back on with additional questions and comments. Okay, let's continue with our questions and comments. And again, thank you for your patience. It really helps us with our interpreter services to keep up with all of the activity. So this question, Phil, this one will go back to you since you talked about bus stop locations in detail. And this one, and since you were talking about 60-second, this participant would like to ask that Phil gives similar information about the rationale for the placement of stop A4. I believe that stop could have been retained at location A6 or could have be moved further south on Telegraph in front of the apartment building. Phil, you want to comment on that?
Sure, I can talk about that. So this is the southbound at 55th stops. So the existing stop is a near side stop north of the intersection. And the proposal is to put it to the south as a far side stop. This location would have a 40-foot bus stopping just as close as we can get it to the first driveway into the surface parking lot for the commercial uses that are past the corner. And this would mean that the rear of a 40-foot bus would be just about in line with the south edge of the outdoor seating that's there at the Well Cafe. We have looked at options to move the stop a bit further down. The questioner asked about in front of the apartment building. That's ends up being more of a mid-block kind of stop. In a long block, there's quite a distance between the crosswalks at 55th and Claremont and 52nd. So we would like to locate stops closer to crosswalks than that so that people have easier access to the other side of Telegraph. We did look at and have been looking at putting the stop in between the two driveways to the commercial use that's sort of behind that pedestrian icon that you see in the drawing. And there's some coordination and discussion that would need to occur with the property owner and the city of Oakland about that. But we'll be looking at those issues further.
Great, thanks, Phil. So let's switch gears slightly, and we can open up the floor to those calling into the Zoom phone lines. So we'll start taking those questions. Tammy, do we have any questions from our phone participants?
Yes, we have a caller with the name of call-in user 1. I will go ahead and unmute you. Go ahead.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm speaking on behalf of my mom, May, who received the mail about the proposal to change the 6-line bus stops from Prince Street. There was a pair of bus stops from Prince Street to Woolsey. Our family has lived for more than 60 years at Telegraph and Woolsey area and used the Prince Street stops at both ends. Over the decades surrounding Woolsey business streets have incurred an increase in deliveries where workers need to drive and will park trucks and cars on Telegraph and Woolsey streets since none of the businesses have dedicated parking. Meanwhile, many of their customers also drive into the neighborhood. Some park without permission inside our private driveway and block ours and our neighbors' driveways and litter all along Woolsey Street. It's already dangerous for pedestrians and bicyclists who utilize the Woolsey Street bike corridor alongside the current amount of car and truck traffic that gets diverted from Telegraph. By taking away 8 car spots on Telegraph and Woolsey intersections to create these 2 bus stops, this unthought out planning will drive more cars and trucks onto Woolsey Street, a narrow 2-way street blocked at both east and west ends. Please retain current bus stops at Prince Street and Telegraph. Prince Street businesses have their own dedicated parking lots. Also, it might even prevent sideshows on Prince Street intersection where I see increasingly marked tire treads on the pavements. Thank you for your time and consideration in retaining the bus stops at Prince and Telegraph instead of the unthought out proposal to move them to a more dangerous location on Woolsey Street.
Great, thank you for your comment. Mika, do you want to talk about? Oh.
I do also want to add a comment that Prince Street has always had a north and southbound bus stops. I did notice a couple of years ago you removed the southbound 6-line, and I was wondering why at that point.
Sure. Mika, do you want to take the safety concerns about the stops at Prince Street?
Sure. This is Mika Miyasato. At the Prince Street intersection is an uncontrolled intersection, meaning they are side streets. The Prince Street is stop controlled, and the the existing bus stop at the Prince Street is a near side of the uncontrolled intersection, which we are trying to avoid so that pedestrians will be visible at this location. And also in the other direction, the ones that the caller mentioned that the bus stop was taken away, that we did find the bus stop were not accessible, and also the safety concern. Thus, we removed this bus stop due to the safety concern for our bus riders. And
Thanks. Go ahead.
And one more item that the reason we proposed the bus stop at the Woolsey Street is based on the stop spacing. We're trying to balance the safety needs for making sure that the bus riders have safe bus stops location, as well as the access to bus stop. We want to make sure that the bus stops are proposed. We have a bus stops approximately every 1,300, about 1,200 to 1,800 feet. That has been our goal for this telegraph corridor.
Thanks, Mika.
Robert, maybe I can just briefly mention something about the concerns about what's happening with on-street parking. We do recognize that both the removal of stops and the addition of stops, and sorry, this is Phil at Community Design and Architecture again. We do realize that these create concerns, but they also create opportunities. And we are planning, as we get more as we start to pin down where the bus stops will be, to have discussions with the cities and where appropriate with adjacent stakeholders about the use of those stops. And as was mentioned earlier, this is really a city policy decision that needs to be made about the use of these of the parking spaces. But there are options that can address existing loading needs and basically management of the parking so it better serves adjacent uses.
And Robert, I have one more item related to this. Thank you, Phil, for mentioning that we are working with the city. We do have a representative from a city tonight, and also listening into today's presentation. And we have been working closely with the City of Berkeley representative, as well as the Oakland counterparts. And one of the things, that many times that came up is that, that don't remove a parking, or that type of the parking provided is not right in front of my businesses. So we are talking about the bus stops, but we are also, hearing how the curb spaces are used through our comments and the surveys. So we'll be working with the city, our counterparts at the City of Berkeley and City of Oakland, and with the proposed bus stop changes that we'll be working to, when we move our bus stops or where we are proposing, how would the vacated space be changed? What other parking changes needed to be done to accommodate the new bus stops?
Great, thanks, Mika. Let's check our Spanish and Chinese phone lines. Do we have any questions on the Spanish phone line?
Hi, this is Diane. There are no questions from the Spanish line.
Thank you, Diane. Do we have any questions on the Chinese phone line?
Hi, there's no questions on the Chinese interpretation line tonight.
Thanks, Stephen. Let's answer another question, and then maybe we can take another pause for the interpreters. The question is from Alex Knox, Executive Director of the TBID. Can you elaborate on the reasons for shifting to longer lengthwise bus stops? What are the problems experienced at the standard length stops that you're seeking to address? Will Buller, I think this would be a good one for you to address on the need for the bus stop lengths.
Yeah, sure. You know, many of the bus stops that exist in Oakland and other Bay Area cities are very old. And you know, they come from an age of, I guess, non-detail or smaller buses, but generally we're looking at 30, maybe even 40 feet long bus stops, and a 40-foot bus stop, and definitely not a 60-foot, simply can't pull in. Logistically, you can imagine that trying to pull around a parked car, a large bus, then pulling it flush to the curb, and then pulling it back out from flush to the curb requires a bit more than just the length of the bus. This is why we like far side bus stops, because it allows the bus drivers to pull into that stop and use the intersection to get aligned to pull in straight in. And if we don't do this, the back end of the bus sticks out in the lane of traffic, many times sticks out into a bike lane or otherwise, and it disrupts traffic. It's just not as good and not as efficient, effective, and safe. So, you know, this is why we're trying to design and set up our bus stops for the type of buses that operate and use the corridor. Gives us also a more efficient stop, faster stop. We can pull in and pull out quicker and easier when it's the right length.
Robert, maybe I can add just briefly to that. This is Phil again from Community Design and Architecture. And I just wanted to talk about my personal experience on Telegraph with this issue. That's my bike commute to work. And I've done that commute for, you know, probably about 15 years to downtown Oakland. And, you know, I don't blame the AC Transit drivers for it. I understand the condition of those stops. And as a cyclist, you know, that can be a problem when the buses aren't able to fully pull into the stop. So this is an important improvement to really make it a more multimodal street as well, so that it works for cyclists better.
Excellent point, Phil. Thanks, Will. Let's take another 30-second break here for our interpreters to take a break and catch up. All right, we have a few more questions and comments in our Q&A box. I will just go ahead and read them off. Will, this is a follow-up question to something you mentioned earlier. Can you explain in layperson's terms the concept of mainline delay and the way that automatic pedestrian recall would affect transit operations on the corridor?
Yeah, my apologies for not having used layperson's language earlier. I fall into that trap easily. I'm sorry. So the main corridor is Telegraph that carries the majority. It's of the traffic. When we reach a major intersection with two competing arterials, then that's a little different. However, we're dealing with Telegraph, so that's the main corridor and the signal coordination along that corridor. And so when we say main line, we're talking about the green time and the green band for coordination along Telegraph. And so with PED recall, it basically makes coordination almost impossible. And so what ends up happening is every single cycle, every 60 seconds of that signal, the pedestrians are called back. How that impacts transit is that it, just like the rest of the traffic, they get stopped at every single intersection every 60 seconds, rather than flowing through more effectively from north to south. I hope that answered the question.
Thanks, Will.
Robert, maybe I can add briefly. This is Phil from Community Design and Architecture again. Some of you might be thinking, well, I've been further up Telegraph near the UC Berkeley campus, and the light goes to a walk in some cases without me having to push a button. Where the equipment allows for it, often cities will look at the level of pedestrian activity at an intersection, and at least at certain times of day, program the signals so they have what Will was calling ped recall, where you don't have to push a button. But in other places where there aren't as many pedestrians, then you can get that benefit to the traffic along the street, traveling along the street that Will was talking about, where you might get a pedestrian walk sign showing up for the cross street, but there's no pedestrians to cross the street. So that's what the engineering design of these signals is trying to avoid.
Thanks, Phil. I think, Phil, this would be appropriate for you to also answer. Has AC Transit done studies on how these parking spaces have been utilized? There seems to be plenty of parking on Telegraph and not enough buses.
Sure, this is Phil again from Community Design and Architecture. There haven't been studies done for this project on the utilization of the parking at the stops. But in general, we're trying to be responsive to concerns that we have been hearing, both through some of the comments in this meeting, and we've also been getting a lot of comments through the online survey from business owners, building owners, and others talking about concerns about parking. And so again, this ends up being really, I guess, an opportunity for the cities and the adjacent users, the adjacent uses along the block, to have a discussion about how the parking should be managed. And there are opportunities in some places where people have made decisions, for example, to do something like a bus parklet. We don't know that that would necessarily be appropriate on Telegraph because of bike use for one reason. But if you have spent time on Solano in Albany, there are a couple of these now. And that's something that, again, wouldn't be a part of this project, but could be an opportunity that an adjacent business owner might want to talk to the city and AC Transit about after this project is implemented.
Thanks, Phil, for bringing that up. And that is true. That's a very exciting opportunity that we would be happy to talk with businesses on investigating further. So I'm going to go to a question that was submitted earlier. Businesses do not like to have bus shelters in front of their businesses, especially with the current design. Temescal Bid also would like to see more frequent cleaning of bus shelters. So actually, I will take this one. I'm familiar with the bus shelter program at AC Transit, and we're actually in between contracts right now for the bus shelter program and its maintenance. And there's a slide up on the screen that shows what the responsibilities are of the local jurisdictions, AC Transit, as well as the contractor. And our contractor in this case is Clear Channel Outdoor. So we have a contract, or we've had a contract with Clear Channel Outdoor since 1999, and it has since expired, and we're in bridge contracts with them to make sure that we can get what we need out of our next long-term contract, or to figure out what is the best shelter program for AC Transit. So this is a really good time for us to look at maintenance requirements, holding Clear Channel more accountable for the maintenance and response time, looking at different designs. The shelter design that we picked is over 20 years old, and there are more updated shelter designs, some that are more transparent, some that take up less of a footprint. So we have this opportunity right now to look at these things, and we will be coming up with different alternatives to present to our board of directors at AC Transit for them to consider and give us direction on the path forward. And we acknowledge that the model that we have is a little bit outdated. Static advertising is not as strong as it was a couple of decades ago. And so we're trying to figure out what is that best solution that can give us, from what AC Transit's perspective is and interest is the nicest shelter for our customers, as well as the best maintained. And this will have to not only be worked out through AC Transit, but also with the local jurisdictions who own the right of way and also have a say in where shelters go. Okay, so let's go to our next question. And this one is on parking. And maybe Phil, you can start, and then Will and Mika, you can jump in as needed. Is AC Transit working with the DOT, I assume ODOT, on the removal, addition of parking spaces along Telegraph as part of this project? And for areas that have a net loss in parking, is there a way to replace those lost parking spots with additional metered spots on the same block or just around the corners?
Sure, this is Phil Erickson from CDNA, and I can start in responding to that. We have been looking at the potential for ways to find it. It's really a combination of looking at side streets, but also looking at the management of the parking along the street. For the Dana Street project that's associated with this, there have already started to be conversations between the team at AC Transit, the city of Berkeley, and some of the adjacent users about these kinds of issues related to passenger loading spaces. We've been looking at the conditions around the bus stops, and it's actually not just metered parking. For example, at the 55th Street stop that we talked about earlier, there is a lot of time-limited parking around that area. So 1 hour during business or 2 hour parking during business. And these might create opportunities to think about, again, in conversations with the parking management folks at the City of Oakland, about metered parking, or maybe changing time limits, possibly re-signing some spaces on side streets to have time limits. It's specifically at that location where the stop would be removed on the north side of the intersection. You gain some spaces there. I think in the drawing, in the analysis we've done, it's 2 additional spaces. But then extending from there north under the freeway, there's parking with no time limit. So could that be time limited? Could there be meters there? And that helps create more availability of parking for the commercial uses that are along the street. But again, this is something that the cities would need to be brought into the discussion and then work with the adjacent users to find the appropriate solution.
And Robert, this is Mika, and I can follow. And again, that we will be discussing different options, potential solutions for the mitigation for the bus stop relocation, new bus stops. And we'll discuss as city partners on what are the best use of the curb, given that we are proposing bus stops. And also another items we'll be coordinating with the cities will be what amenities do we want to place to the new or relocated location. So we'll be engaging a lot of conversation as to, do we move, the shelters? Do we not move shelters? Where do we need benches? Another item to coordinate will be, some locations we have a bicycle racks. Can we move the bicycle racks slightly so that we can have ADA access to bus stops? So we'll be, throughout this project, we'll be coordinating very closely with our city partners, both at the City of Berkeley and the City of Oakland.
Thanks, Mika. Yeah, it's certainly complicated with bus stop design and curb space management and street furniture and making those all work. We're going to move to, it's 7:30, but we're going to move to our last question. And Mike Eshelman, I know you've been silent so far, but we think you'd be appropriate to answer this one. I would like to see the stop spacing that will reduce trip times, but I am also concerned about them being greater than 0.4 miles. And then an add-on to that is I would like to increase accessibility and reduce dwell times with more boarding islands. And I know, Mike, you have some experience with both of these. Maybe you can chime in.
Yeah, thank you very much, Rob. I'm Michael Eshelman. I'm the manager of service planning at AC Transit. So for the first question, when this project was designed, planners went out and walked the entire route to look at every stop to determine their condition as well as the appropriate spacing. We have our bus stop guidelines, policy 501, that is adopted by the board and includes a section for essentially rapid bus service with no underlying local. And for that, the stop spacing is generally about 1/3 of a mile. So that's what we've been shooting for, is about 0.3 miles or so between the stops on this particular corridor. With respect to accessibility and dwell, Will already spoke about the length of the bus stops and how that can impact the ability of the bus to get flush with the curb to improve ADA accessibility. We also spoke a little bit about bus boarding islands and how we would like to have them, but if the project budget doesn't necessarily allow for them, except for at Dana, the City of Oakland has several projects south of 51st where there will be, currently are and will be soon even more bus boarding islands. And then also Phil mentioned the parklets, the possibility of parklets in the future as a public-private partnership with individual businesses along the corner. And for those of you familiar with the one current and soon to be future second parklet on Solano, those are a huge win for the business, for bus riders, and for the reliability and accessibility of our service.
Great, thanks, Mike. That's a lot of good information. And I noticed that there was a final comment in the chat that we do have recorded, but we have exceeded our time. So we'd like to give a big thank you to everyone who joined us on this meeting. Recordings of this session in English, the PowerPoint presentation in English, Spanish, and Chinese, the project survey, additional project information, and AC Transit contact information will be available on the project website at, and I'll spell this out again, http://www.actransit.org/RAPIDORS. Again, that's www.actransit.org/rapid corridors. Please send your comments and complete the survey by June 18th. The survey is available in English, Spanish, and Chinese. If you're interested in learning more about the Dana Complete Street Pilot Project, please visit the project website for more project information. Comments for the Dana Street project are due on June 7th. Thanks again to everyone for participating and have a great rest of the evening. Take care.